This is an English-only version of a talk given previously in English with Spanish translation. The Rosicrucian philosophy tells us that the universal spirit has almost infinite facets. The signs and constellations of the zodiac, which are expressions of the universal spirit, have almost infinite facets. Beside that, the signs also have many levels of expression. Various people live the signs of the zodiac at various levels according to their advancement in the evolutionary process. At the very top and the very bottom of each of the signs and planets are epitomes of the qualities of the sign or planet. For example, the epitomes of Aries at the top is a fearless, impeccable warrior. At the bottom, Aries is a brawler, a street fighter, a soccer hooligan. The Sun was in Virgo when this talk was first offered, and we followed the lead of Max Heindel and talked about Pisces. Since we're studying astro-spiritual physiology to improve ourselves in the healing work, we want to be better invisible helpers, we must look at the more problematic facets of Pisces, the things that need healing. One of the lower epitomes of Pisces is the alcoholic. Alcoholism is a severe problem in the world, and it is difficult to heal. So we're going to talk a little bit about the physiology, the psychology, astrology, and spiritual philosophy of alcohol with an eye to healing and better living. One of the reasons alcoholism is so difficult to overcome is because intoxication is rich in illusion. Pisces is co-ruled by Jupiter and Neptune. Neptune is the planet of illusion more than any other planet, and Jupiter exaggerates the illusion. Illusion occurs when we see things in such a way that they seem to be what they are not. The spiritual worlds are very subtle, and if we are not very subtle and very much in control, we are likely to illusion. Max Heindel used to say, it is the highest string in the violin which gets out of tune most easily. In terms of sensitivity, Neptune is probably the highest string. The co-ruler, Jupiter, shows us why illusion is so difficult to overcome. Jupiter is probably the most optimistic, positive, and cheerful of all the planets. Thus, with the combination of illusion with Neptune, when things seem what they are not, and indulgent positivity of Jupiter, we see a happy drunk. The intoxicated person becomes careless, universally generous, and negligent, as we see in a slobbering drunk. Slobbering drunk. Pisces is the 12th sign of the zodiac, and it resonates with the 12th house of the horoscope. This resonance works out in several ways with several kinds of spiritual significance. The 12th house is the house of escape. People turn to alcohol and intoxication to escape the reality of their lives. Pisces is one of those common or mutable signs that tends to shirk responsibility. The same thing that gives sensitivity also gives frailty and the lack of durability. So one loses heart and seeks escape. With Pisces, the escape is too often into false happiness and false positivity of intoxication. Neptune and Pisces and Jupiter are highly idealistic. When an individual with idealism must confront the reality of dull, ordinary daily consciousness, there's a desire to escape. We learn another manifestation of Pisces in the 12th house in the Rosicrucian philosophy. We are told by Max Heindel that the first miracle performed by Christ Jesus was to turn water into wine at the marriage at Cana. The spiritual psychological effect of alcohol, especially the alcohol in wine, is to close off lingering involuntary clairvoyance. One of the effects of uncontrolled desire is to harden. It hardens one psychologically and it hardens one physically. So involuntary clairvoyance is closed off. This leaves us isolated in our consciousness in the outer material world. We are then exiled, which is another 12th house word, and our removal from the Garden of Eden is then complete. The purpose of this is to focus our attention completely on this world so we can overcome it and return triumphantly to the inner worlds with complete positive control. Thus, when we shirk our duty and escape into the illusion of alcoholic happiness, it is a serious matter. If we persist in our folly, there is an ironic inversion. In the deeper stages of alcoholism, we come to a state called delirium tremens. In that state, one has inescapable, uncontrolled clairvoyance of the lowest regions of the desire world, filled with its monsters. It is an example of extreme imbalance, such as we spoke of when we discussed Libra and physiological imbalance. Max Heindel tells us that adaptation is of high importance in changing evolutionary conditions. There are many forms of adaptation, just as there are many evolutionary conditions to which we have to adapt. Adaptation to Pisces is sensitive, compassionate compensation. That's what Neptune is. Adaptation in the brain is called neoplasticity. The brain is constantly being reformed throughout life to adapt to changing conditions. Some of the adaptation is to external things and some to internal things. If we enjoy pleasant internal experiences, even the false ones given by alcohol, the brain adapts to reinforce that behavior because it likes, or we in our bodies like pleasure. It does this by means of neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are chemicals that change and regulate brain function. Neurotransmitters seem to be ruled by Neptune and probably the moon. It is said that the ebb and flow of neurotransmitters varies according to the moon. For example, dopamine, which is one of the neurotransmitters, is strong in the third quarter of the moon, necessary to calm the lunar forces. Continued use of alcohol changes the neoplasticity such that the continued satisfaction in pleasurable or pseudo-pleasurable brain experience becomes a dependency. a serious dependency as strong as addiction because of the reshaping of the brain. It is too much to go into the chemistry of this because it is pretty advanced chemistry. The very simple thing to us is that Neptune rules addiction and dependency. The symbol of Neptune is a trident. A trident is a fork with three tines to it. Astrological symbols must be kept very simple for practical use. In reality, the tines of the trident have barbs like the end of a spear that we use for fishing. Once the barbs enter the flesh, it is difficult to remove them without tearing flesh away. That is how Neptune functions in addictions. Once we get it into us, it's very hard to get out without ripping something apart. It is important to remember that we are dealing with subtle things. Pisces, Jupiter, and Neptune illusions are subtle, and we must be alert to not be fooled by them. The greatest danger in alcoholism is due to the Jupiter-Neptune component. The individual under the influence of alcohol always believes overconfidently that he or she can overcome alcohol at any time. Under the influence of alcohol, there is the illusion that one can drive an automobile safely. I had a very dear friend who was a severe alcoholic. And finally, after many years, he was sober for several months. And then he died because he overconfidently believed he could enjoy one more binge. He couldn't. When we are actively doing things, we are so intent on what we are doing that sometimes we are not self-observant. We do not notice the attitudes we may be developing or expressing. Thus, from time to time, we need to step back and look at things, as we do in retrospection. Thus, we say that we withdraw from the world when we step back. In the horoscope, there are 3 houses that indicate opportunities to withdraw from the world: the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th houses. The 4th house indicates the nightly withdrawal in sleep. The 8th house indicates more thorough withdrawal in death or in consciously leaving the body. The 12th house indicates a more general withdrawal, as in a monastery or something like that. When one is alone and away from the world, our faults stand out and are obvious to us as they must be. We see all of the things we depended on before we withdrew, and we see that we tried to bolster ourselves with those things. Pisces is the sign of compassion, which is a caring connectedness with others in feeling and in sensitivity. The caring for others is represented in the exaltation of Venus in Pisces, which also indicates that alcoholics have a craving for sugar, a very strong craving for sugar. However, the sensitivity in connectedness does not develop willpower. So we say Pisces is weak-willed. In this weak-willed state, we depend on the crowd for strength. We lean on others. This is even shown in history, in that the architecture of the cathedrals built in the heart of the age of Pisces have flying buttresses. And these flying buttresses are something to lean on, something similar to the way that the alcoholic leans on his elbow, which is placed on the bar in a tavern. However, when we are alone and withdrawn, as in a monastery, we are keenly aware of the things we depend on, because we want them so badly, we ache for them to distraction. We see how we are chained to them in our unconscious nature, like the way the two fish are chained together in the picture of Pisces in the pictorial zodiac. They will continue to bother us, these things in our subconscious, until we break our dependency and free ourselves. We do this by letting go or releasing our dependency and attachment, which process we will return to in a few minutes. For now, we need to look at something else. Pisces is the only sign of the zodiac where a planet has both its detriment and its fall. Mercury is in detriment in Pisces, and Mercury is in fall in Pisces. Thus we conclude that conditions indicated by Pisces are not favorable to things ruled by Mars. For example, Pisces is an excitable, emotional sign, and we don't think very well when we are emotionally excited. From Jupiter, we see that Pisces is a broad, general sign, and from Neptune, we see that it is indistinct, like a fog or a cloud. Mercury likes facts. It likes definite information, as indicated by Gemini and Virgo, which it rules. This difficult astrological environment applies to the physiological phenomenon we are studying. Mercury rules the nerves and neural activity. Nerves and neural activity suffer from the presence of alcohol. It is a psychological fact that alcohol depresses neural activity. Physiologically, alcohol is a depressant. Depressed neural effects are evident in the behavior of someone who is drunk. Normally, mercury in the nerves are very swift. Under the influence of alcohol, nervous reactions are very greatly slowed down, which is why accidents occur, because we cannot react to an emergency situation in time. I have a very bright friend who has alcoholic problems, and that friend was once so intoxicated that it took minutes to state a sentence which could have been stated in a few seconds. It was an extremely sad thing to see. Neuromuscular coordination is impaired so that speech is slurred, and one staggers instead of walking. Balance and a sense of space are interfered with so that one feels dizzy, Neptune dizzy, when drinking. The centers in the brain through which the spiritual ego forms judgments are in a state of depressed activity. So one makes very bold decisions. All of these things are consequences of alcohol depressing neural function. Prolonged use of alcohol injures nervous tissue. This results in what are called shakes, and in a general loss of equilibrium. We have already discussed dependencies and escapism, so we don't need to go further into that. Earlier, we mentioned that the Rosicrucian philosophy teaches that the effect of alcohol on the desire body is stimulation. Now we can see that at the same time the desire body is stimulated, the neural control is depressed. This is why this is a very nasty situation. It allows the desire body to have its way and run wild. If we add to this the fact that the spiritual ego works through the mind, and the mind has a special resonance with the reflecting ether, which works through the nervous system, we can see how bad it is. In alcohol intoxication, the spirit has partially lost control of its vehicles of consciousness, the very vehicles which provide its nourishment in the form of soul material, the vehicles it has spent millions of years to develop. If we change our perspective, we can say that we have surrendered clear consciousness to the adversary within. Surrender is a key-word of Pisces. Alcohol is a word from Arabic meaning the spirit. Etymologists do not completely understand this. The ancient Greeks did. They named the wine god Bacchus. Bacchus would take a hold of the followers of Bacchus and lead them into extreme libidinous behavior, into lewdness and revelry. Part of this is an unleashing of the lower desire body. However, it also seemed to take partial control of the consciousness of intoxicated people. Many years ago, I used to try to reason with drunken people, and I was always unsuccessful. The drunken person would make silly, false arguments and mock me. There would always be an expression on the face of whoever it was that was drunk that was a mocking expression. It was a mocking mask of Bacchus. Neptune rules spiritual entities, so all of this is possible. We're talking about a spiritual changing very subtly of the consciousness of someone. But whether there is a possessing spirit of alcohol or not, we are still surrendering our consciousness and disrespecting the God within when we take in intoxicants. Scientists used to teach that alcohol kills brain cells, but they do not teach that now because they cannot see that in laboratory tests. Such tests prove that alcohol does not directly kill brain cells, but only depresses brain cell function and eventually harms brain cells. However, there is plenty of evidence to indicate that alcohol indirectly kills brain cells. The way that alcohol indirectly kills brain cells is all about Jupiter, the co-ruler of Pisces. There are several things that work together in this, and they are all Jupiterian. They are also a matter of degree and proportion. Brain cells do not regenerate easily, and when they do, it is very slowly. The brain is a mass of neural cells of various types packed together very closely. As a whole, the brain is fragile. Since it is so important to the indwelling spirit, it is heavily protected. The wall of protection from injurious forces from without is the skull, and the skull is very hard. The brain is also likely to injury from the shock and jarring forces that would harm it inside of the skull. For this reason, the brain is suspended in fluid, which acts as a shock absorber. Most brain cells die from within. There are many things that can directly kill a brain, various types of poisons, but we don't have time to address them. We will only study the indirect death from alcohol. Brain cells are called neurons. There are 3 kinds of neurons. Neurons are the cells with the longest life in the human body. However, they die quickly without oxygen. Oxygen starvation occurs when red blood cells cannot get through the capillaries in the brain, very tiny capillaries. When we studied stroke several months ago, we said arteries could become clogged with plaque from fats like cholesterol. That's not the only problem with the brain. Neurons use only sugar, not protein or fat. There are other reasons why red blood cells cannot get through to the neurons, reasons involving expansion and contraction. Jupiter rules expansion, which in the body is called dilation. In small amounts, alcohol expands the capillaries, but it doesn't help thinking because it also injures and depresses neurons. This dilation is why alcoholics have red noses, because the capillaries have been dilated to the degree of bursting. This dilation is also why one feels warm when taking a drink when out in very cold weather. The dilation brings more blood to the skin and one feels warm, but it is an illusory warmth. Again, we see Neptune with its illusion. When one takes more than a little alcohol, the capillaries become constricted and oxygen does not get through and the neurons die. This is not the main cause of neuron death from alcohol. There are others. Max Heindel tells us clearly that the components of blood are ruled by the water signs in astrology. Plasma, the fluid part of blood, is ruled by Cancer. Hemoglobin, which is the red blood cells, is ruled by Scorpio. And fibrin, which is the substance material, is ruled by Pisces. And fibrin is where the problem is manifest. Fibrin is important in blood clotting, which is a way that Jupiter provides protection to the body. But fibrin is not a constant in the blood. Fibrinogen is a substance that produces fibrin when it is needed. And then other chemicals break it down in a process called fibrolysis when fibrin is not needed. So our blood is thicker or thinner depending on the needs of the body. With alcohol, fibrolysis is impaired, and the fibrin becomes malformed and excessive. The fibrin becomes elongated, stiff, and sticky. When this happens, the blood cannot get through the tiny capillaries, and the neurons die from lack of oxygen. The blood sometimes becomes thick like sludge, and the lack of oxygen from that is called hypoxia. From this we can see how wise Max Heindel was in knowing about fibrin and its Pisces rulership. It is always beautiful to see how astrology is shown in physiology. Astrology is also seen in the spiritual psychology of all of this. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. In a Pisces or 12th house retreat, one looks back on the entire cycle of the zodiac or the entire cycle of the horoscope. Pisces is also an emotional water sign. So when one looks back on life, it is often a sentimental experience. A drunk also looks back on life, but with regret, which he tries also to escape. So we have a sentimental drunk, sometimes even with tears. All of these emotions can be used positively or negatively. The 12th house can be the alcoholic treatment center. Even the surrender of Pisces that we have spoken of can be used to the positive. Overcoming alcoholism by willpower is rare. Pisces is not a strong sign of willpower. Alcoholics Anonymous, which is very successful in treating alcoholism, uses surrender. In Alcoholics Anonymous, patients are taught to let go of their neurosis and self-seeking and turn their lives over to God in a manner similar to the way Christians give their lives and sins to Christ. We don't live for ourselves alone, we live for Christ. This is one of the reasons why, one of the lessons that we learn in the age of Pisces as alcoholism is so strong. That's all I have for now, and I'll close with the Rosicrucian student's prayer. O God, increase my love for Thee, so that I may serve Thee better from day to day. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in Thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Thank you.